So yeah, I built or first I should mention who I am. My name is Dan. I'm a Microsoft 365 developer, consultant kind of thing, based in Denmark. I am mostly active over on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call that by now. And I do a bunch of SPFX stuff. So the sample actually kind of came about in a weird way. There was sort of a thing where you have these properties when you do a tenant-wide deployed extension. And what I realized is that a lot of new developers don't actually know they're there and don't leverage the options they give. So you might actually be able to save yourself some time, save a couple of API calls. And for those of us who are familiar with them and used them in the past, they tend to be quite frustrating to edit because you're editing JSON in a quick edit in classic SharePoint, which is always a fun experience. And if I recall correctly, during a community call, I think it was Vesa who was editing it, and everything sort of fell apart on him. And I realized, okay, this is not just an issue I'm having because I don't understand classic SharePoint. It's a general issue people are having. And I thought, how could we solve that? So I went ahead and I built a tool to handle just that. So I figured we should initially start looking at just how things work if you're doing it manually today. So what we have is I've just deployed a basic SPFX on 1.18 command set extension web part or a extension. Just build it straight up from the Yeoman generator. So what we have is a button in here. If we select an item, we have the command 1 and 2. That's it. Let's say we wanted to edit these properties that are the text. What you traditionally would do, you would either go to your classic app catalog, you would go to site contents, and you would then scroll down, find the tenant wide extensions list. Microsoft actually made this a little bit easier doing with the modernization of the app catalog, where we now have more features and we can press open for the tenant wide extensions. But we do end up in the same editor. So let's say I wanted to change this. One item is selected in the list, and I wanted to add a exclamation point into that. What I have to do is I have to press edit and sort of click into this thing, hope that I'm not missing anything, click out of it, stop editing, and it works. And sometimes you'll find it will add a bunch of like escape characters in there trying to avoid JSON. Now, if that worked, we can go in here. We can do a quick reload, and we should see the exclamation point. And that's one of those things that are hard to demo because it sort of fails sometimes. There we go. Now, I thought that process is kind of tedious. There's a lot of things you have to know. For instance, the list template, you just have to know that 101 is document libraries. You have to know these, remember these things that are command bar. You could say context menu. So I sort of packaged those away. So what you get is with the web part, you get a full list of all your tenant-wide deployed extensions. What we have now is just one extension on this tenant. I can click that. Another thing is I flipped the thing inside SharePoint. It's called disabled to set to true, which is really frustrating. So I actually flipped that Boolean for you, so you can clearly see if it's enabled. Then we have the option to move the location to the context menu, edit the JSON with a little bit of like theme to it, so you can actually see what's going on. We could add a couple of more exclamation points here. Hit save, and there we go. Now, if we head back into the document or the list in here, we should eventually see it move to the context menu. And it is not moving. Did I not set it to the? I did not move it. There we go. Maybe if I do that, it'll actually work. There we go. I think, yeah, there we go. It's moved. Other than that, we have the option to move it to a different type of list. This is the documented, I think they're called like base types of lists. So I just essentially mapped those in to drop down to make it easier for people, in case you don't have the documentation on hand. Yeah, you can move it over to a document library if you want to, and that will work. So I think that's about it for like the demo. What I'm going to talk about next is just a little bit of the technicalities and how I got to the data and how I'm doing it. So let's move on and look into some code. So the first thing I needed to do was to find a way to get access to my tenant's app catalog. And I was actually starting to spoof around a little bit in the network traces, seeing what's going on, until I realized that PNP.js has actually figured that all out for me. And I can straight up just go ahead and say, give me the tenant app catalog web. Now that gets me as far as to get access to the app catalog, which is great, but I need to find that list that we were just talking about. So it's down here. It's named Tenant Wide Extensions. The obvious thing would probably be to just say get by title. But we also all know that that is not a good idea, especially because I have seen people rename things for all kinds of reasons. So the first thing I did is I went through the documentation. Oh, that was definitely the wrong button. Thinking that these list-based types would definitely be mapped in there, and there surely is one for the tenant-wide extensions list. Well, it turns out there is one, but it's not in the documentation. Actually, there's a lot of lists types that are not in the documentation. So I found another guy on the internet who'd scraped a bunch and had a way longer list. Unfortunately, that didn't even help me either. So what I did was I just pulled the list on my tenant, verified that, and I saw that it was 337. And then I did a bit more digging, went to a couple of different tenants and found that that's like the common thing is that list is always 337. So I added it to my list types, of course, making sure that the next developer who comes along knows that it is not a documented way to do it. And then from there, it's pretty easy to get the list because it's essentially just going base template equals the list type. And then what I'm doing here is just selecting the ID and selecting sub1, being considerate about the amount of data that we're pulling. Since we're only going to use the ID in the next step where we're going to work with the extensions, that seemed like the best way to do it. So from there, what I found was that it is essentially just working with list items. I pulled them, I mapped them into a model that I like, and I can from there update anything I want on them. And yeah, so I have a service method here that's called clean extension that will remove all the OData tags and stuff that are coming along with any REST APIs that we're using in SharePoint. Other than that, no magic is happening. Calling the two other methods we just saw, resulting in a list of all the tenant-wide extensions, which I guess is unless you have more than 100, you wouldn't get those. There's probably a bug there to be fixed at some point in case somebody has that many extensions. So to summarize, there's a list in your app catalog that contains the tenant-wide extensions and all the properties of them. Of course, you can install something on a site and you can override it, but I guess this is something that I think it's not that well documented. It is mentioned in the documentation, but I've found a lot of new SPFX developers are unaware of this option. It is a really nice way to work with data that you might want to use in your solution and not have to do an API call to get, such as a message of the day or something like along those lines. And yeah, sometimes you have to go the unofficial route to get the data you want, but make sure you like document it, put a little note in there. Martin was pretty nice in his presentation as well, mentioning, hey, I'm doing this thing that is not the official way to do it. Unfortunately, there's just times where that is the best way to do things. Yeah, rounding off, sometimes we just have a lot of fun when we go, hey, I wonder if I could do that with code. which was essentially what triggered this because I was just frustrated with that classic experience.